I'm so jazzed to share my warrior story with you. Truth be told, let's go back in time 11 years ago when I first moved to Chicago from the UK. I'm from Edinburgh, Scotland, if any of you couldn't tell by the accent. Not from Illinois. But, I moved here 11 years ago, and to be honest, I had no fucking clue what an entrepreneur was. I couldn't tell you anything about startups, startup lives, raising capital, selling a business, acquisitions, any of that type of stuff. And hilariously, fast forward 10 years, and I've actually learned a lot to the point where I've run 3 businesses, I sold a business, and now my husband and I are running a company with a solid mission to teach 1 billion kids to code. Yeah, 1 billion kids, which is going to take 30 years, yay, until I die. But there's 3 things, I think, like looking back on my life and looking back on my, roller coaster of an entrepreneurial journey, I think there's kind of 3 massive lessons that I've learned. And so let's start with the first one. The first big lesson that I've learned has been how important it is to build a strong management team that has a broad skill set and perspectives and expertise. And actually, John Pletz from Cranes and I were just chit-chatting about this a couple of minutes ago, and it triggered me even more to speak about this and why important it is. So when I first started my first company, Social Katy, way back in 2010, it was just me. If anything, you could just call me Scrappy Katy, not Social Katy. But it was scrappy, right? I would roll up my sleeves, I'd lead from the front, I would go banging on like entrepreneurs' doors and like selling them on social media services. It was all about the hustle and the grind and the hard work and effort and energy on my own. And then as I was building up my client base, I recognized that I couldn't take on all that client work on my own. So I started poaching people from companies like Groupon. Sorry, Groupon, if there's anyone that works there. But I started poaching people from all these different startups to get them to work with me on these social media services. And even though this was a really great, scrappy way to grow my business, it wasn't exactly a great way to scale the business. And it's important to recognize the difference between those 2 things because they're very different. What I realized is that by me growing the business on my own and by hiring people that were like-minded that handled a lot of our client services, we couldn't scale because my expertise is good for growing a company, but it takes a diverse set of skills and expertise to really scale a business. So what the hell did I do? I ended up networking like crazy and going to events just like this to meet my co-founder. He was a dude named Andy, amazing guy, could not be more opposite. Our skill sets could not be more opposite, but they were extremely complementary. And so I brought him onto the team, and as we were growing together, Andy and I hired a head of sales, a head of finance, senior project managers that would manage an army of community managers. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's just really important that to scale a business, you have to hire a very, very strong management team that has all sorts of different skills that fill in the gaps that you can't do yourself. The second lesson that I learned is how important it is to have processes in place. So standardized processes, repeatable and predictable processes. What the hell does that mean? Some of you might be thinking. So when you're small and scrappy, again, go back to Scrappy Katy days, it was amazing me doing all this work, and a lot of the work was in my head, but that's not repeatable, right? Like, I need to be able to take all those thoughts and every single thing that I'm doing, write it down, document it somewhere, document it clearly somewhere, so that when I bring on more folks onto my team, it's super easy for me to train them and their roles are very defined. So to give you like a real example of this, at Codeverse, we use a software platform called GitHub, which some of you may be familiar with GitHub, right? It's massive with software developers. But my point with this is within GitHub, we basically, by department, organize exactly what every employee does. And by everything, I frigging mean sales strategy. And underneath sales strategy, it has everything from sales scripts. It has everything to like how to onboard salespeople, offboarding salespeople, what the scripts and phone calls should look like, follow-up emails to our customers, commission, salary, bonus structure, literally every single thing into that department. And that carries on through operations and PR and marketing. Because again, when you're growing your business and you're scaling and you're hiring people, people need very, very clear and defined roles that have to be organized in a place. We used GitHub. If you're scrappy, like me in the old days, just use Google Docs. And then the third big lesson, and this is the one that I find that many entrepreneurs kind of fuck up initially, but it is so, so important, is building a solid business model and following it diligently. Your business model essentially tells you how to run your business. So what do I mean by that? I'll give 2 examples and then I'll shut up. The first example, and they're very different examples because my first business, Social Katy, was completely different than what we're building now at Codeverse. At Social Katy, our model highlighted everything from expenses, overhead, how many clients we were currently had, how many clients we were projected to bring in a month. And that was great, right? Because that allowed us with confidence to hire people ahead of plan, which in turn allowed us to scale and grow quickly to the point that we got acquired 4 years later. Now, the Social Katy model was peanuts compared to the Codeverse model. Within the Codeverse model, it's enormous and it tracks everything from expenses and overhead and rent and utility bills and what it takes to actually build out one Codeverse location and then what it would take to build out 10 Codeverse locations. So it maps out everything. It maps out CAC, which is your customer acquisition costs, lifetime value of a customer. Basically, the point that I'm making is your decisions for your company are driven by data, but your decisions in the company are also driven by your model. Numbers are everything. So to kind of sum all this up, the big key takeaways for anyone here that's an aspiring entrepreneur or an entrepreneur that's looking to get to the next stage in your business and figuring out how to scale and grow, the biggest things that matter are people, processes, and diligently following your model and being super focused on your business plan.